I built $1 million construction empire with my bare hands, raised 4 kids, and thought I had the perfect marriage. Then I found my wife's laptop open and discovered she'd been living a double life for 6 months. When I confronted her, she said I was overreacting. That night, I packed my bags in silence while she slept. By morning, I was gone. What happened next destroyed her world and rebuilt mine. My name is Daniel Kane. I'm 45 years old, and I used to think I had it all figured out. 22 years ago, I started Kane Construction with nothing but a beat-up pickup truck and my father's toolbox. Today, we're one of the most trusted home renovation companies in northern Michigan. Sandra and I built this life together. We have 4 children. Ellie, 18, just started at Michigan State. Asher, 16, is our athlete with football scouts already calling. Then there's Camila, 13, and Henry, 11. We adopted them 4 years ago when their grandmother couldn't care for them anymore. They came to us scared but became as much our kids as Ellie and Asher. Sandra works as office manager for Dr. Peterson's dental practice downtown. She's always been the organized one, keeping our family calendar straight and making sure everyone's where they need to be. At least, that's who she used to be. The first thing I noticed was her phone. Sandra had always been casual about it, leaving it on counters while she cooked. But 6 months ago, that changed. Suddenly, it was always in her hand or back pocket. She'd excuse herself to check work emails and disappear for 20 minutes. Then came the late nights. Dr. Peterson was supposedly updating their computer system, and Sandra claimed she needed to stay behind. Except when I drove by the office after picking up Henry from baseball practice, the parking lot was empty. Every light was off. When I asked her about it that night, Sandra barely looked up from her laptop. "Oh, we finished early," Sandra said. "I stopped by the grocery store afterward." But there were no grocery bags, no receipts, nothing. The distance between us grew after that. Sandra used to wait up for me when I worked late, curled up on the couch with a book. Now, by the time I got home, she was already asleep, turned away from my side of the bed. Our conversations became purely functional. Henry needs new cleats. Ellie's tuition payment is due. We operated like business partners, not like husband and wife who once couldn't keep their hands off each other. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago. It was Tuesday evening, and I got home early from Traverse City. Sandra's car was in the driveway, but the house was unusually quiet. I found her in our home office, laptop open, completely absorbed in whatever was on the screen. "Hey, babe," I said, placing my hand on her shoulder. Sandra jumped like I'd hit her with electricity, slamming the laptop shut so hard I thought she might break the screen. "God, Daniel, you scared me," Sandra said, her hand pressed against her chest. Her face was flushed, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. "Guilt. Sorry," I said, stepping back. "Didn't mean to startle you. What were you working on?" "Just some scheduling stuff for the office," Sandra replied, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Dr. Peterson wants to reorganize the appointment system." That night, as Sandra slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to shake the feeling that my wife was becoming a stranger. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Sandra was already gone, her side of the bed cold, coffee mug missing from the kitchen counter. She used to make enough for both of us, leaving mine in the pot with a little note. Not anymore. I dropped Henry off at school and headed to the Peterson dental office. Not to confront anyone, just to get a feel for what was really going on. The receptionist, a sweet older woman named Betty, greeted me with a smile. "Daniel Kane, how nice to see you," Betty said. "Are you here for Sandra?" "Actually, I was hoping to schedule a cleaning," I said. "Sandra mentioned you folks have been pretty busy with the new computer system." Betty looked puzzled. "New computer system? We've been using the same software for 3 years now. Works just fine." My chest tightened. "Oh, maybe I misunderstood. Sandra's been staying late to help with some kind of transition." "Sandra usually leaves right at 5, Betty replied. "Dr. Peterson likes us to keep regular hours. The only person who stays late is our hygienist, Monica, and that's just on Thursdays for emergency cleanings." I thanked Betty and walked back to my truck, my hand shaking slightly as I started the engine. 22 years of marriage, and Sandra had never lied to me. Not about anything important. Sure, she might fib about how much she spent on new shoes or claim she only had 1 glass of wine at book club. But this was different. This was deliberate deception. That afternoon, I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do. I drove past the office again at 5:15 p.m. Sandra's car was gone, just like Betty said it would be. So where was she spending those extra 3 hours? When I got home, Camila was at the kitchen table struggling with algebra homework. My little girl looked frustrated, the eraser shavings scattered across her notebook. Need help, sweetheart? I asked, sitting beside her. I don't get any of this, Camila said, pushing the book away. Mom usually helps me, but she's been so busy lately. Busy with what? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Camila shrugged. Work stuff, I guess. She takes a lot of phone calls now. Sometimes she talks really quiet, like it's a secret. Even our 13-year-old had noticed. I helped Camila with her math, but my mind was elsewhere. During dinner, I watched Sandra carefully. She seemed normal, asking the kids about their day, reminding Asher about his football physical, discussing Ellie's upcoming midterms. But when her phone buzzed, she glanced at it quickly and then flipped it face down without reading the message. Aren't you going to check that? I asked. It's probably just Dr. Peterson, Sandra said. I'll look at it later. After the kids went to bed, I tried a different approach. Sandra, is everything okay between us? I asked as we got ready for bed. She paused while brushing her teeth. What do you mean? I feel like we're ships passing in the night lately, I said. You're working late. I'm busy with projects. We barely talk anymore. Sandra rinsed and turned to face me. We're talking now. You know what I mean. She sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. Daniel, we've been married for 22 years. We have 4 kids, a business, a mortgage. This is what real life looks like. We can't be newlyweds forever. I'm not asking to be newlyweds, I said. I'm just asking for honesty. What's that supposed to mean? Sandra asked, her voice sharp. Nothing, I said, backing down. Forget I said anything. But I couldn't forget. And I had a feeling things were about to get much worse. I needed concrete proof. Saturday morning, Sandra announced she was going grocery shopping, something that usually took her about an hour. Keep an eye on Henry while I'm gone, Sandra called out. He's supposed to be cleaning his room, but you know how that goes. Sure thing, I reply, my heart pounding. The moment her car disappeared, I moved toward her laptop on the kitchen counter, a mistake she'd never made before. My hand shook as I approached the screen. Her email inbox showed dozens of messages from Colin Reed. Subject lines made my blood run cold. Missing you already. Can't wait for tonight. You looked beautiful today. I clicked the most recent message. Sandra, last night was incredible. What we have is real. I've never felt this way about anyone. The way you looked at me. I can't stop thinking about it. I meant what I said about our future together. I love you. See, 6 months of betrayal. I scrolled through more emails, each one a knife to my chest. One from Sandra made me sit down. Colin, I think Daniel's suspect something. He's asking questions about my schedule. We need to be careful. Maybe we should take a break until things calm down. Colin's response, I'm not giving you up. We'll figure this out. You deserve to be happy. You deserve someone who appreciates you. A car door slammed. I closed the laptop as Sandra walked in with grocery bags, humming like she hadn't a care in the world. How was shopping? I asked, voice surprisingly steady. Fine, Sandra replied without looking at me. They were out of Henry's cereal. He'll probably complain. I watched her put away groceries. This woman I'd loved for 22 years, mother of my children, and felt like I was staring at a stranger. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I couldn't wait any longer. Sandra, we need to talk about Colin Reed. Her face went white. She stared at me in shock, mind racing to calculate how much I knew. I don't know what you're talking about, Sandra said, but her voice lacked conviction. Don't lie anymore, I said firmly. I've seen the emails, the hotel visits, everything. Her facade crumbled. She buried her face in her hands, crying. It's not what you think, Sandra sobbed. It just happened. I never planned this. How long? 6 months, she whispered. 6 months of lies. When were you going to tell me? Sandra looked up with red eyes. You're overreacting, Daniel. It doesn't mean anything. I felt so alone. You're always working. Colin makes me feel alive again. I'm overreacting. I stared in disbelief. Yes, Sandra said, standing straighter. You're making this bigger than it is. This doesn't have to destroy our family. Even caught red-handed, she was minimizing her betrayal, making me the villain. That night, while Sandra slept peacefully, I made my decision. At 4:30 a.m., I quietly packed 2 duffel bags with clothes and documents. I left a note, staying at Vernon's. Kids can reach me on my cell. By morning, I was gone. Vernon's guest room smelled like coffee and sawdust. My brother made breakfast, pretending this was normal. You did the right thing, Vernon said, setting coffee before me. Dad always said a man knows when to walk away. My phone buzzed constantly. First denial from Sandra. This is ridiculous. Come home. Then anger. You're abandoning your family. Finally bargaining. I'll end it with Colin. We can get counseling. Too late. At noon, Ellie called. Dad, where are you? Mom's crying. Henry's confused. Camila won't leave her room. My heart broke. I'm an Uncle Vernon's sweetheart. Mom and I have problems, but this isn't about you kids. Are you getting divorced? I don't know yet, but we both love you more than anything. I called our lawyer, Patricia Walsh. With 4 children, 2 adopted, we need to proceed carefully, Patricia said. Adoption laws can be complex in custody situations. Losing Camila and Henry terrified me. What about the business? Since Sandra handles finances, she'll claim significant entitlement. We'll audit everything. That evening, Vernon convinced me to call Sandra. We need to discuss the kids, I said. Daniel, please come home, Sandra begged. This is tearing our family apart. The kids needed honesty from their mother. They didn't get it. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. I didn't walk out on my family, I said firmly. I walked away from a lie. Sandra hung up, but I felt clarity for the first time in months. 3 days into my stay at Vernon's, I realized I needed more than just emotional distance from Sandra. I needed hard evidence for what was coming next. Patricia Walsh had been clear, custody battles involving adopted children could get messy, and I needed every advantage possible. You planning to fight this thing properly? Vernon asked over morning coffee. Because if you are, you better get serious about documentation. He was right. I called a private investigator, Mike Torres, who specialized in marital cases. We met that afternoon at a diner outside town. Daniel, I've been doing this for 15 years, Mike said, sliding a contract across the table. Your wife's been sloppy. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, credit card trails. If they've been meeting regularly, there's evidence. What about the business finances? I asked. She handles all our accounts. That's where things get interesting, Mike replied. If she's been using marital assets to fund this affair, that's financial misconduct. Courts don't look kindly on that, especially in custody cases. I signed a contract and handed him a retainer check. 2 days later, Mike called with preliminary findings. Your wife's been busy, he said. Hotel charges twice a week for 3 months. Always the same place, the Marriott downtown. Credit card shows expensive dinners, jewelry purchases at Tiffany's. None of this matches her dental office salary. My stomach dropped. She's been buying him gifts. Looks that way. There's more. She opened a separate bank account last month. Been transferring money from your business accounts regularly. That evening, Asher called. My 16-year-old son rarely showed emotion, but his voice was tight with anger. Dad, I found something, Asher said. Mom's been lying to all of us. I heard her on the phone with someone named Colin. She told him you were just being dramatic and that everything would blow over soon. Son, I appreciate you telling me, but don't. No, Dad, Asher interrupted. She's wrong. You're not being dramatic. She's the one who messed up our family. After hanging up, I sat in Vernon's living room feeling both vindicated and heartbroken. Even my teenage son could see what Sandra refused to acknowledge, that her actions had consequences beyond her own selfish desires. The next morning, Patricia called with updates on legal strategy. Daniel, the evidence Mike's gathering is solid. Sandra's financial misconduct gives us leverage, especially regarding the children's college funds she's been accessing. College funds? My voice rose. She's been stealing from our kids' education money. It appears so. We're talking about nearly $40,000 over 6 months. That's going to play very poorly in family court. I realized then that Sandra's betrayal went deeper than just adultery. She'd been systematically dismantling our family's financial security to fund her affair. The woman I trusted with our children's futures had been gambling it all away for stolen moments with a younger man. That night, I made a decision. This wasn't just about my wounded pride anymore. This was about protecting my children from a mother who'd proven she'd sacrifice their well-being for her own selfish desires. The hardest part of this nightmare wasn't Sandra's betrayal. It was watching our children suffer for her choices. A week after leaving, I drove to the house to pick up Camila and Henry for their soccer games. Sandra had agreed to the visit, probably hoping it would make her look cooperative to any potential court proceedings. Henry ran to me the moment I pulled into the driveway, his 11-year-old face lighting up with relief. "Dad, are you coming home now?" he asked, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Not yet, buddy," I said, my heart breaking, "but I'm here for your game today." Camila emerged more slowly, her 13-year-old eyes holding a maturity that shouldn't exist at her age. She'd been through enough trauma before we adopted her, and now she was living through family destruction again. "Is this because of Mom's friend?" Camila asked quietly as we drove to the soccer field. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "The man who calls her all the time." "Henry and I aren't stupid, Dad. We know something's wrong." At the soccer field, I sat in the bleachers feeling like every other parent was staring at me, the man whose wife was having an affair. But watching Henry score 2 goals and seeing Camila's team win their match reminded me what really mattered. These kids needed stability, and Sandra had shattered that. After the games, I took them for ice cream. Henry chattered about school and friends, trying to maintain normalcy. But Camila was quiet, picking at her sundae. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" she finally asked. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I need you to understand something important. Whatever happens between your mom and me, you and Henry are my children forever. The adoption papers don't change that, and nobody can take that away from us." Camila's eyes filled with tears. "Promise." "I promise." When I dropped them back at the house, Sandra was waiting on the porch. She looked tired, older somehow, like the weight of her lies was finally catching up to her. "How were the games?" Sandra asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Henry scored twice. Camila's team won." I replied, not getting out of the truck. "Daniel, we need to talk about the kids. They're confused, asking questions I don't know how to answer." "Maybe you should have thought about that before you started lying to them for 6 months, I said. Sandra's face flushed. "You're poisoning them against me." "I haven't said a word against you to those kids," I replied firmly. "But I won't lie to them either. They're smart enough to figure out that something's wrong when their mother destroys their family." "I didn't destroy anything," Sandra snapped. "You're the one who left." "I left a lie," I said. "You destroyed the truth." As I drove away, I saw Henry and Camila watching from their bedroom windows. 2 kids who'd already lost one family, now watching their second family fall apart because their adoptive mother couldn't stay faithful to the man who'd given them a home. That night, Vernon found me on his back porch, staring at the stars. "You know what the hardest part is?" I said without looking at him. "What's that?" "Those kids have been abandoned before. Camila and Henry know what it feels like to have adults give up on them. And now Sandra's showing them it can happen again." Vernon sat down beside me. "But you're not giving up on them." "No," I said firmly. "I'll fight for those kids until my last breath." Sandra made her choice, but she doesn't get to take my children away from me. 2 weeks after leaving home, I decided it was time to meet the man who'd helped destroy my family. Mike Torres had provided Colin Reed's workplace address, a marketing firm downtown where he worked as a junior account executive. 29 years old, unmarried, living in a trendy apartment his salary couldn't possibly afford. I waited in the parking garage of his office building until 5:30 p.m. When Colin emerged from the elevator, I recognized him immediately from the photos Mike had taken. Tall, athletic, wearing an expensive suit that screamed trying too hard. He looked exactly like what a 44-year-old married woman might find exciting. Young, confident, and completely unaware of the destruction he'd caused. "Colin Reed," I called out as he approached his silver BMW. He turned, and I saw the exact moment recognition hit his face. His confidence evaporated, replaced by the look of a man who knew he'd been caught. "You must be Daniel," Colin said, attempting to maintain composure. "Sandra told me about you." "I'm sure she did," I replied, walking closer. "What exactly did she tell you? That I was a workaholic who didn't appreciate her? That our marriage was already over?" Colin shifted uncomfortably. "Look, man, I didn't plan for this to happen. Sandra and I just connected, you know? Sometimes these things are bigger than—" "Stop," I said firmly. "You're 29 years old. You knew exactly what you were doing when you started pursuing a married woman with 4 children. She said you two were basically separated. Colin protested weakly. We were sleeping in the same bed every night until 2 weeks ago, I said. Does that sound separated to you? Colin looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I care about Sandra. This isn't just some fling. You care about her so much that you helped her steal from her children's college funds? I asked. Because that's what those expensive dinners and hotel rooms cost. My kid's future. His face went pale. I didn't know about any of that. Now you do, I said. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to end this relationship immediately. You're going to stop taking her calls, stop meeting her, and disappear from her life completely. You can't tell me what to do, Colin said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, I can, I replied calmly. Because if you don't, I'm going to make sure your employer knows about your relationship with a married client. I'm going to make sure your parents know what kind of man they raised. And I'm going to make sure every mutual friend Sandra has knows exactly how their affair started and what it's cost my children. Colin stared at me for a long moment. Sandra said you were reasonable, that you'd understand eventually. Sandra says a lot of things, I said. Most of them are lies. But here's the truth. You helped destroy a family. For kids are crying themselves to sleep because their mother chose you over them. That's your legacy, Colin. That's what you should be proud of. I turned to walk away, then stopped. Oh, and Colin, if you really cared about Sandra, you'd want her to fix her relationship with her children instead of running away with someone young enough to be your son. Driving back to Vernon's, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, control. I couldn't fix my marriage, couldn't undo Sandra's betrayal, but I could make sure the other man understood the real cost of his actions. 3 weeks into the separation, Patricia Walsh called with news that changed everything. The financial audit was complete, and Sandra's misconduct was worse than we'd initially discovered. Daniel, she's been systematically draining your accounts for 8 months, not 6, Patricia said during our meeting. We're talking about nearly $70,000 in marital assets used to fund this affair. $70,000. I felt sick. That's more than Ellie's entire college fund. It gets worse. She's also been forging your signature on business loan applications. There are 3 separate loans totaling $45,000 that you supposedly co-signed but never saw. I stood up and walked to Patricia's office window, trying to process the magnitude of Sandra's betrayal. She's been stealing from me for months. The good news is this gives us tremendous leverage in custody proceedings, Patricia continued. No judge will award primary custody to someone who's been embezzling from their children's education funds. What about the business? Kane Construction remains yours. Sandra has no legal claim to it since it was established before your marriage, and she's never been an official partner. However, she might try to claim spousal support based on her contributions over the years. That afternoon, I met with my accountant, James Murphy, to assess the financial damage. We spent 3 hours going through bank statements, credit card records, and business accounts. Daniel, I have to ask, how did you not notice these withdrawals? James said, spreading documents across his desk. Sandra handled all our personal finances, I admitted. I focused on the business side. She managed household accounts. I trusted her completely. That trust cost you dearly. Look at this pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday for months, $500 cash withdrawals. Always from the same ATM, near the Marriott downtown. The evidence was overwhelming. Sandra hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She'd been systematically stealing from our family's future to fund her affair with Colin. My phone rang. Asher's name appeared on the screen. Dad, you need to know something, Asher said urgently. Mom's been talking to a lawyer. I heard her on the phone saying she's going to fight for the house and half the business. What else did you hear? She told the lawyer that you abandoned the family and that she's been supporting the household financially while you focused only on work. Dad, that's not true, is it? No, son, it's not true. Your mother has been stealing money from our accounts to spend on her boyfriend. I have proof. This is so messed up, Asher said, his voice breaking. Why would she do this to us? I don't know, Asher. But I promise you this. I'm going to fight to protect you kids and make sure you can still go to college. That evening, Vernon found me in his garage, aggressively working on an old engine he'd been restoring. You're going to strip those bolts if you keep going like that, Vernon said. She's been stealing from my kids, Vernon, I said, not looking up from the engine. For months. While I was working 16-hour days to build a future for our family, she was stealing that future to buy gifts for her boyfriend. What's your lawyer say? That we'll win. But winning doesn't give me back the money she stole. Doesn't give me back the trust. Doesn't give my kids back their intact family. Vernon sat down on a workbench. You know what Dad would say? What? That sometimes you have to tear something down completely before you can build it back up stronger. Maybe that's what's happening here. I looked at my brother, this man who'd stood by me through everything. I'm scared, Vernon. Scared of losing my kids. Scared of starting over at 45. Scared that I'll never trust anyone again. You won't lose those kids, Vernon said firmly. They're smart enough to see who the real parent is. And as for starting over, hell, Daniel, you built a successful business from nothing once. You can do it again. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to survive Sandra's betrayal. I was going to use it as motivation to build something better. For my kids, for myself, and for the future I was determined to create without her. 6 months after leaving Sandra, we finally had our day in family court. Judge Margaret Harrison presided over what would determine the custody of my children and the division of our assets. Sandra sat across the courtroom with her attorney, looking composed but pale. Patricia Walsh had prepared meticulously. We had bank records, hotel receipts, forged loan documents, and Mike Torres' surveillance evidence. Most importantly, we had testimony from Ellie and Asher, both old enough to speak for themselves about which parent they wanted to live with. Your Honor, Patricia began, the evidence shows a pattern of financial misconduct spanning 8 months. Mrs. Kane systematically embezzled nearly $70,000 in marital assets to fund an extramarital affair. Sandra's attorney, David Miller, tried to paint me as an absent workaholic who'd driven his wife to seek emotional connection elsewhere. But when Patricia presented the forged loan documents, even Miller looked shocked. Mrs. Kane, Judge Harrison said sternly, did you forge your husband's signature on these loan applications? Sandra's composure finally broke. I needed money for household expenses. Daniel was always working, never available to sign papers. These loans totaled $45,000. The judge continued. That hardly constitutes household expenses. The turning point came when Ellie took the stand. My 18-year-old daughter spoke clearly and confidently. Your Honor, my father has always put our family first. He worked long hours to provide for us, including my college tuition. My mother's actions have hurt all of us, especially Camila and Henry, who've already been through one family breakup. When Asher testified that he'd witnessed Sandra planning to continue the affair, Sandra began crying openly. Judge Harrison's ruling was swift and decisive. Given the evidence of financial misconduct and the testimony of the older children, I'm awarding primary custody to Mr. Kane. Mrs. Kane will have supervised visitation until she completes financial counseling and therapy. Regarding assets, Sandra would receive minimal spousal support and no claim to Kane Construction. The stolen money would be repaid through her share of the house sale. Outside the courthouse, Patricia smiled grimly. Daniel, you won everything that mattered. Your children, your business, your future. As we walked to my truck, I saw Sandra standing alone by her car, Colin nowhere to be seen. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered Camila's tears and Henry's confusion, and any sympathy disappeared. That evening, I picked up all 4 children from Sandra's house for the last time. They were moving in with me permanently, and we were starting fresh in a new house across town. Dad, Henry said as we drove away, are we going to be okay? We're going to be better than okay, buddy, I replied, watching Sandra's figure shrink in the rearview mirror. We're going to be a real family again. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of our new house, making pancakes for my 4 children on a Saturday morning. Kane Construction had not only survived Sandra's attempts at sabotage, but had grown stronger. Word had spread about my integrity during the divorce proceedings, and several new clients had specifically sought us out. Ellie was thriving at Michigan State, calling weekly to check on her siblings. Asher had received a full football scholarship to Central Michigan. Most importantly, Camila and Henry had adjusted well to our new life, their trust and family stability slowly rebuilding. Dad, when's Uncle Vernon coming over? Camila asked, setting the table. Around noon, I replied. He's bringing his famous chili for the game. The doorbell rang. and Henry ran to answer it. I heard unfamiliar voices and walked to the front door to find Henry talking to a woman about my age with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "I'm Rebecca Martinez. My son plays on Henry's baseball team, and he left his glove in our car after practice yesterday." "Oh, you're Tommy's mom," I said, taking the glove. "Henry's mentioned Tommy quite a bit." "He's mentioned Henry too," Rebecca smiled. "Says he's the best shortstop in the league." As Henry ran off with his glove, Rebecca and I stood talking for a few minutes about our kids, the team, and life in general. She was recently divorced, worked as a nurse at the children's hospital, and had the same weary but hopeful look I'd seen in my own mirror. "Maybe we could grab coffee sometime," I found myself saying, "if you're interested in adult conversation that doesn't involve baseball statistics." Rebecca laughed. "I like that very much." After she left, Camila appeared beside me with a knowing smile. "She seems nice, Dad." "She does," I agreed. "But we're taking things very slowly. You kids are my priority." "We know that," Camila said, hugging my arm. "But it's okay if you're happy too." That afternoon, as I watched the football game with Vernon and my kids, I reflected on how much had changed. Sandra's betrayal had nearly destroyed us, but in rebuilding, we'd become stronger than before. The children were more resilient, our bond was deeper, and I'd learned to trust my instincts again. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Coffee Tuesday at 10? There's a place near the hospital that makes excellent pancakes." I typed back, looking forward to it. "New friend?" Vernon asked, noticing my smile. "Maybe," I said. "But first and always, I'm a father. Everything else comes second." Vernon raised his beer. "To second chances and doing things right the second time around." "To family," I corrected, looking at my children. "The one that matters, and the one we choose to build." As the sun set through our living room windows, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine contentment. Sandra had tried to destroy our family, but instead, she'd freed us to become the people we were meant to be. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift she could have given us.